you put someone who's a volunteer and very competent on staff, and it's having all kinds of technical difficulties. But I do apologize. We have a lot of material. Very little of it is new for this year, but it is they are things that are important for our fall session, for our spring session of athletics. So without further ado, we'll get started. Next slide is the agenda. My name is Ron Freeman, venue director for athletics for Special Olympics Maryland. These are the things we will go through tonight, not necessarily in this order, but these are the general rules that we'll follow, what we have currently about qualifiers, our resources. We have a bunch of administration slides that are in every webinar for the spring season. Same common administrative slides about the paperwork, the key forms, entry process. We will go over that at a high level, but again, this is more as a reference material for you, as these have not changed in the last since last year.
Ron,
okay, if we move. Yes.
Ron, you can hold for just a moment. Actually, one of the slides that we added, let me go back here. For those of you who are on the phone or viewing the webinar, we changed the audio function for a number of reasons, and to ask questions, there are two ways to do that now. Everybody, when they join the webinar, comes in muted. You can either type in a question in the question box that you should see on the little control panel that came up when you logged in to GoToWebinar, or you can raise your hand. There's a little button that looks like a hand on the control panel as well, and if you click on that, it puts a little note that I can see. I'm serving as the clicking through for Ron, but I'll also watch the moderator. Monica Stevens asked, is there captioning for this webinar? And unfortunately, no, other than the text that's on the screen. There is, that's something that, actually we have not had in the past, but that's something we can certainly look at for the future, if that's a need that we have for those folks, or those coaches and other folks who are have challenges with their hearing. So that said, Ron, I'm going to go back to you, and we're back at the agenda.
Okay, if we can move forward to the next slide.
Entry process.
Entry process, eligibility. Athletes must complete in a minimum of 2 qualifying athletics competitions to be eligible for summer games. That could be a qualifier, that could be your area's spring games, but minimum of 2 athletics competitions. An athlete can enter up to 3 individual events and up to 2 relays. One of the relays on the first day, a 4x200, and on the second day, on Sunday, either the 4x1 or the 4x4. Once again, the pentathlon is considered a single individual event. So if you have an athlete doing pentathlon, even though they're doing 5 athletic competitions within the pentathlon, if they choose to do another event, the pentathlon again is ruled as is considered as a single event. All events offered in the Special Olympics rulebook will be offered except the 10K. We're not doing races longer than 10K, and it's been a few years, maybe since before I was venue director, since we've had anyone doing anything longer than a 5K. Okay, next slide. I'm sorry, Mike, is there additional slides?
No, never mind. Someone had typed in that they could only see the entry slide, but that seems to be resolved.
Okay. The next slide about entries. This is a combination Special Olympics Maryland rules. If you have an athlete entering the standing long jump, they may not also enter the long jump. and nor may they enter the high jump. Or softball or tennis ball throw, they may not also enter the shot put or the mini jab, and athletes cannot enter both of the ball throws, either the softball and the tennis ball. Wheelchair events, open to athletes who use a wheelchair to move. They may also enter an assisted walk if that's appropriate. Motorized wheelchairs are not permitted in the manual wheelchair events. And any athlete entered in events shorter than 100 meters may also not enter wheelchair events longer than 100 meters. Rules no different than previous years. Next slide. Running and walking events. Any athlete entered in an event shorter than 100 may not also enter events longer than 100. Athletes in the 100 may also be entered in the 50 as part of a transition. But if your athlete wants to run in the relay, they must also be able to run at least 100 meters. So as it states there, any athlete who is doing just the 25 and the 50 may not run a relay, a leg up a 4x100. Next slide. General guidelines for entry percentages for your areas. These haven't changed. No more than 25% of your delegation may run in the 50-meter dash, no more than 20% for a softball throw, no more than 25% in the standing long jump. And again, our purpose is to move our athletes along into more challenging events, and hopefully we see our athletes progressing to to more appropriate kinds of competitions. Hopefully on the slide that you have, Mike, it's just the next slide for the rule book. We're using the 2015 USATF rules. Hopefully I corrected that slide. What I'm looking at also shows the 2012, but we're using the 2015 rule book. Next slide. As of now, there are no rule changes for this year. If anything comes up, we will certainly notify all the areas, all the coaches.
Actually, Ron, I do want to make a note for folks who may not be aware of it. There is a rule change for Special Olympics that Maryland instituted or initiated. We were the first ones for both athletics and snowshoe to offer the 4x200 meter race. And with the new 2016 rules that came out this past summer, that is now an official event for track and field, or for athletics and Special Olympics, as well as for snowshoe. So we're kudos to Ron and the athletics management team and the coaches here for embracing it and making a change that affects athletes around the world.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I had forgotten about. I mean, I knew that we'd been running the 4x2 and forgotten to mention that is now an official rule change within Special Olympics. Okay, next slide. These are the I mean, I can go through and read all of these, but keep note for the shot put. We have two different weights for the shot, for male and female, and for athletes, and for our younger athletes. The 800 meter will have a one-turn stagger. The 1500 and longer races will use a waterfall start. The 4x4 will use a three-turn stagger if we have more than 4 teams, a one-turn stagger if we have 4 or fewer teams. Oops, I moved ahead on my slides and didn't ask. Protests, and this is was a 2012 change. Protests may be followed by an athlete or a head coach, and this was a rule implemented in 2012, which we followed. We have had, I don't remember last year whether we had any athletes protest, but I know in prior years we have. So that's a good opportunity and a learning opportunity for our athletes. Next slide. In terms of measurement, if you can remind all the areas when we are measuring, we certainly keep track of this as far as our management team and our folks out on the field measuring for field events. We measured down to the next lowest centimeter, the reason being that the distance thrown or the distance jumped, either vertically or horizontally, hasn't quite reached the next centimeter, so they're recorded at the next lowest centimeter. A couple of shot put rules, please read, and we will go over this again with our venue director for shot put so that we're all in sync on what is expected, what is required for our athletes. Next slide. Mini jab rules. Again, we will go over this specifically with our management team who will be running the mini jab events. Over the shoulder throws, tip first. For mini jab, ball throws, the rules are a little less strenuous. Any type of throw is good for a ball throw or a softball throw as long as it lands within the boundaries of the vector. For the standing long jump, it must be a 2-foot takeoff. You must jump with both feet behind the takeoff line, and the distance is marked, and this is the same. I'm sure on the next slide we'll talk about it. Distance is measured from the mark nearest the takeoff line to the front of the takeoff line. Next slide. For the softball and ball throwing areas, our vectors start with a 2 meter by 3 meter vector box. The mini jab vector box looks the same. However, it is 4 meters by 8 meters, allowing for our athletes to do run-ups for the mini jabs. Next slide. For the long jump, the front of the toe board is 1 meter from the edge of the sand pit, so our athletes must be able to jump at least this distance. So as you practice this, if our athletes are able to run it, able to reach that distance, then this is an appropriate event. If they're not, then perhaps standing long jump is their event, because if they don't reach 1 meter, it is a fault. Before the event starts, as we're practicing earlier in the morning, the jumpers can place a marker on the side of the runway for running distance or approach distance with either chalk or tape. Same with the high jump rules. They must be able to jump at least 1 meter high to enter this event. No dives. If there's a dive, it's an automatic DQ. And again, jumpers can place a mark on the runway or the takeoff area. I don't believe last year we had any high jumpers other than our pentathletes, but we certainly encourage you as coaches to get any athletes who might be able to do this event moving towards the high jump. Bill Wood, once again, will, I think it was Bill, perhaps it was Chris, both of our management team folks who may or may not be monitoring the high jump are extremely knowledgeable about high jump. And when we get to coaches training later on in the session, I'm going to ask for both of their help in perhaps giving some guidance on how to teach the high jump.
And Ron, one of the coaches clarified that last year we did have at least one athlete who was in the high jump, but not the pen.
Well, I stand corrected. Thank you.
I think he's there jumping in purple, actually. So.
Okay. Next slide. This slide shows the standard track colors for the markings on a track. You can read this for for help in guidelines when you are practicing your turns and relays around the track. Just be aware that standard track colors do not necessarily mean mandatory and uniform across all tracks. So just so you're aware of that, I have no idea about the percentage of tracks. I would assume that more tracks than not have the standard track colors, but just be aware. Next slide. This is just showing a visual of the starting lines for all of our races. If you look at this this diagram, all the verbiage for the starts are the for a mental picture, that would be the stands of Towson United Stadium. Next slide. Again, the red stars indicate where the typical location of the starter would be. That will, may help you in your training and your practices, where you should be to start your athletes when you're practicing any one of those events. Next slide.
Ron, actually, I'm sorry for that. Just noting, for those of you who are interested in doing the 4x2, this shows, these two slides show the relay zones or the exchange zones, the general location for the 4x1, which are the relay zone 1, 2, and 3. And for the 4x4, all of the exchanges for the 4x4 are right by the finish line, the common finish line. The 4x2, the exchange zones are at that start area, and then also back over here on what's labeled relay zone number 2. So I know we're hopeful that more and more coaches will be doing the 4x2. It's a great relay to do. It's a lot of fun for athletes who can handle it, but just wanted to be sure you knew where that was, since it's not explicitly marked on the screen.
Thank you. Actually, that's a good reminder to me to update this slide. I suspect we have a similar slide in the pre-competition webinar. If we don't, we'll certainly update it for next year. Thank you, Mike.
Sure. There's, just as a note also, there's a couple of events that are listed there that Special Olympics actually doesn't offer.
All right, the 2000.
But that they're there. This has been used for other track meets as well. We don't have a 2000 distance medley relay, although I'd love to add that if folks can do it, or the 4x8. So something to look for the future.
Yeah.
Okay. On the showing the rules reminders starts slide, Ron.
Yep. Okay. Back to the rules reminders. All races will start with a gun. No exception. Train your athletes to start with a gun. I know sometimes, for many of our athletes, it is it's difficult, and they don't like that. To the extent that we can, the starter will position himself such that it minimizes the audio, the sound of the gun for the athletes. But as far as the track and field competition, all of our races will start with a gun. Hearing impaired athletes should watch for the smoke of the gun, and then may also get a supplemental tap start or a flag start that will be up to not only the starter, but assuming we have enough volunteers. If we can do that, then we will. Next slide. Races up to and including 400 meters, we'll use a 3-command start on your marks, set, and then the gun. Races longer than 400 meters, just use a 2-command start, which is on your marks and then the gun. Athletes can use starting blocks in races up to and including the 400 meter. We do have some athletes every year who do use starting blocks. please feel free to bring your own, or in many cases, we just borrow Towson University's. False starts are charged to the individual, not to the field. 2 false starts by the same runner will result in a DQ, and it will not run. The starter may call a institute a restart if there's a stumble or a similar problem at the start line, but that's at the starter's discretion.
Ron, as you were, I'm sorry, as we changed the slide, the question came in about may athletes wear earmuffs or headphones if they're scared of the gun or the noise. The answer to that, I sent it to the coach who asked the question, but the answer to that is no. Earplugs are acceptable, but earmuffs and headphones, or even if they're not headphones in terms of playing audio, but that kind of ear covering and such, are not permitted by USATF rules.
Right. Yeah, actually, thank you, Mike. I'm so happy that I was going to answer it the same way.
Good.
After 5 years of doing this, and many years prior to that, being at the track, I finally am learning a rule or two. So, we do find some athletes to get around that are just putting their fingers up against their ears, and but anyway.
We also, while we have some earplugs that we can have available at summer games. They're limited in supply. You can get them yourself, but if it's, as long as it's inserted entirely within the ear and cannot come out, those will be fine. Those, like the foam ones, if you've seen them, are fine.
Okay.
I'm on rules reminder races.
Okay, let's. I'm on a rule reminder starts. So you moved. Oh, races. Okay. I've caught up with you. Athlete must race by him or herself, and we run in. Occasionally, not so much with coaches, but well, not so much at the track at all, even. But we do remind you that you cannot pace your athlete. You can't pace your athlete. Family member. It's just verboten. We will stop you. We'll stop anyone who is pacing, but as a reminder, if we find this to be a case and a problem, that your athlete will be disqualified. For visually impaired athletes, and we do this every year for any visually impaired athlete, we do have a guide rope available, and if your visually impaired athlete is unable to use the guide rope, we have in the past and will continue to be able to use a human guide. General rule in races: run in lanes, including those with a curve. The athletes must stay in the lane. Cutting into an inside lane is an automatic disqualification. Reason being that athlete has shortened the distance. If it's along a curve and lane 6 goes into lane 5, you've effectively shortened that distance. In races run entirely on the straight part of the track, 50s, 100s, there's no DQ necessarily for leaving a lane. However, your athlete will be DQ'd if they impede another athlete. So leaving a lane by itself is not grounds for disqualification, but if in so doing it slows down, impedes, or in any way gets in the way of an athlete, another athlete, your athlete will be disqualified. That athlete will be disqualified. Next slide.
Also, folks, one of the reasons Ron is going through all this, in addition to you should know the rules, and they are the rules, is you should be following these both in your practices as well as in any local meets that you're doing. You need to be following those. It's a real huge disservice to the athlete for you not to follow the rules at your local meet, and then they come to another meet, either hosted by another county or summer games or elsewhere, where the rules are followed and they're confused and don't understand what's going on. So we're not making these up arbitrarily. These are the rules for the sport, and you really should follow them. Same thing goes with family members being confused as to why they can't run with their athlete. I know when I was running the track, we'd hear it every year of, well, I was allowed to do that at my local meet. Well, your coach shouldn't have let you do that. They broke the rules. They were, and it just causes confusion and frustration for folks. So.
Thank you. Yeah, that is right. I mean, we more so at summer games and almost at the athletics competition, more so than anything else I do with Special Olympics. We run this as an official USATF track meet. We have, it's a serious competition. So you're right. Mike is right. You're doing your athlete a disservice if you're not running your practices and you're in the meets that following these rules. I'm under rules, reminders, races, 400-meter race, Mike. Is that the slide that you have up?
Yep.
Okay. 400-meter is a stagger start. Your athlete must stay, or the athletes must run entirely in their lane. 800-meter race is a stagger start, and they must stay in lane around the first turn, and then they can cut in. My slide says it's different from the NFHS rules, which I presume are the National Federation of High School rules. Is that what that stands for, Mike?
Correct. Yeah, they have the 800's a waterfall start for them.
Okay. For any race longer than 800, that's a waterfall start, and your athlete can cut in immediately. Okay, next slide. Finish. And this first bullet point under the finish, the place is determined by the order the racers cross the finish line, not on their recorded times. I mean, we have a timer on each athlete as they come across. We also have someone, and oftentimes two people, getting the order of finish, which sometimes based on the manual dexterity of our timers or malfunctioning watch or any number of other issues may not always match the order of finish. But we are awarding medals and ordering our athletes based on the order of finish, not necessarily their recorded times. Similarly to what we do for field events, the times are recorded to the next highest tenth of a second. A couple of examples there, the same basic rationale. 3.22, they have not gotten as fast as 3.2, so it's rounded up or moved up to the next highest tenth of a second. Again, on the finish line, it's when the torso crosses the finish line as opposed to an outstretched arm, a foot, anything else that could possibly finish ahead of the torso. And for our wheelchair athletes, it's the front wheels. A couple of bullets on assisted walks there. But going back to the finish in terms of how we are judging finish, we aren't taking videos. We're not, nobody on our team has a video camera. If you're protesting or one of your family members is protesting because they have something on their phone that shows their athlete finishes differently than how we've judged it, I'm just going to, as I've said every year, it's generally not a coach, it's generally a parent or a family member. I won't be looking at anyone's video of the finish. I don't know where they're standing. I don't know what they're seeing. Any judgment call will be made for either track or field. I will go by what our management team sees out there on the track. Rules violations and things like that, that's different. And honest effort differences, that's different. But if it's a judgment call, feel free to protest, but I won't be overriding anybody that I see on the track. field riding, our management team.
And just so folks know, that is following the USATF rules. So.
Right. Yeah. I didn't mean sound authoritarian. That my decision.
Right. And I should clarify, the whole thing is against USATF rules to utilize video taken from anyone who's not an official of the games. So.
Yeah. And since we're not taking official video, we won't be looking at others as well either. Okay, I'm on rules and reminders for relays, Mike. And sort of looking at time, and I may stop reading these things so that we can touch on a couple of things, because I know you probably need to clear the lines at about 10 minutes before the hour. Stagger start for the 4x1, stagger start for the 4x2. Both those relays, you need to stay in your lanes the entire race. 4x4 is a stagger start, and those are the rules. We mentioned the 3-turn stagger and the 1-turn stagger based on the number of teams. Next, rules on the relays: passing of the baton entirely within the exchange zone. If it's dropped, the incoming athlete must pick it up and complete the exchange. One athlete can't drop it and have the next athlete pick it up. We will identify the exchange zone, our management team who are out assisting with our relay exchange zones. We'll identify the exchange zone, the front, the back, where the fly zone is for your athlete. We'll place the athlete. We'll tell them where the center is. If you coach them to be either in the front or the back, they'll feel free to move them. They are free to move wherever they want. We will identify what the exchange zone is. We'll talk more about alternates and relays at the pre-competition webinar, but those are the notes that we will follow. Next slide. We talked about this earlier, 4x2. We will run in lanes. That was a question the first year we did it, but we have running lanes every year. If your athlete is running in the 4x2, they may also run either the 4x1 or 4x4 on the next day. Next slide. Suggestions: when you don't have a track, mark your lanes on the sidewalk, on asphalt, wherever you can.
I can suggest, just in the interest of time, we can folks can read the training suggestions when they get to the slides.
Point.
Yeah.
So we move ahead to 2 or 3 slides to the qualifiers.
That's where we are.
Okay. Here's the rules. Must, in order to count as a qualifier, you need to follow the same Special Olympics rules that we do for our state games. I'm not going to go over those rules again, but if you fail to follow those rules, then that could nullify your event's status as a qualifier. I believe, and what I'm looking at on my slide, Mike, is over last year's qualifiers. I believe that slide that you're showing just shows the one qualifier that we have on our schedule right now, which is the Howard County qualifier.
Right. We can send folks. For those of you who don't know, we have a sports calendar that gets sent out to area leaders every 2 weeks with our area memo. We can include that when the slides and the link to the recording go out. And that has the dates and contact information for all the qualifiers that we currently are aware of. So we'll include that for folks from that.
Okay. Okay. The next slide, excuse me, is are just some resources for all you. MySOMD, SpecialOlympics.org, which has our rules, has a fairly robust coaching guide section with videos. I encourage you to use them to help with your practice sessions. There's some really good techniques and tips on how to plan your training sessions. So feel free to to go to specialolympics.org under athletics and take advantage of that. The next slide shows other resources for equipment needs, various websites for your equipment that you may need to purchase for the season.
Just a second, sorry.
And
those of you on the video, somehow we got ahead.
oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It's my fault. I hit something or somehow it jumped.
Okay.
Okay, we're back at that slide.
Okay. So we're on the resources websites continued
Yep.
with the, okay. That is the last slide of the athletic specific set of slides. What we have following this and are the administrative slides, but if I don't know if we have any other questions, we want to pause and
I'll tell you what, just in the time, I can fly through these real quickly. We're not going to go through all of them, but I want to make sure people are aware of the things here. Hopefully everybody's already aware that no athlete or volunteer can participate in Special Olympics at any time in any way if they don't have a current and valid medical form or volunteer application. And there's no exceptions to that whatsoever. There are some additional requirements on top of that for the volunteers in particular. However, if they, in order to be eligible or participate in summer games, there are several deadlines by which information needs to be submitted. The key thing here is talk to the folks in your area who handle your registration and getting stuff into GMS. Make sure you know who that person is, because the dates that are on this slide right now are the dates by which this stuff needs to be in GMS. And GMS is our computer. So you're going to need to get stuff to them ahead of time. There's a training registration deadline, which is April 20th. That's when you need to get all of your listing of all the people who are participating in your training program. They need to be in GMS by that date. Otherwise, they are not eligible for summer games. They can certainly participate in your training program if they add after that, but they are not eligible for summer games. Now, again, people can't be participating without a medical or a volunteer application, but we know that folks start in the program at the beginning or turn the forms in at the beginning, and it takes a little while to turn them around. So you have until, or your county has until May 4th to get any outstanding forms into us, and by that date, by May 4th, we need to have at headquarters a medical for every athlete that's valid through the end of summer games. Medicals can't be expiring in the middle of the season, so while medicals are good for 3 years, again, by May 4th, we need to have at headquarters that. Now, keep in mind also, there's a process by which they need to be submitted, and talk to your area folks, your area leaders, to make sure you know who's handling what. Also, by that date, by May 4th, all coaches, volunteers, partners have to have a volunteer application and protective behavior certification valid through the last day of summer games, which is June 11th. As noted there, all coaches have to have a concussion certification completed and valid through that date. That doesn't say that on there about valid through that date, because anybody who's gotten a concussion certification, just on the timing of it, is going to be valid through then. And then all coaches have to have their coach certification. There's information on coach certifications in the process later on, and Ron can send some stuff out as well. So after the 4th, anybody who we don't have this information from for that's valid through that date are going to be deleted from GMS from summer games. Again, they can, as long as they've got a valid medical, they can continue to participate in your program, but they won't be eligible for summer games. And this is nothing new. Everybody should be familiar with this. Competition registration deadline is May 22nd. That's when every competitor has to have a competitive event and an entry score. Assuming an entry score is required for track and field, every event needs an entry score. You then have until the 30th of May to send in any updated scores, any improved scores. Since we know when folks get stuff sent in by that May 22nd deadline, they may have another competition or two, so you have that time to update your scores. You need to send those in, by the way. Your area folks will be locked out of making changes to summer games at that point, but they can send them into the regional sports director or to Ron, and we'll get them updated for you. Again, work with your area leaders. Note, and we'll see them in just a second, there are new medical forms that we are using now and new volunteer applications that went into place in the middle of 2016. Anything new that's being submitted needs to be on those forms. Anything that's already been in on the old form, there's no problem. For coaches, as a reminder that's been touched on previously, they need to have their Class A or their volunteer application handled. They need to have their protective behavior screening and their online concussion training, as well as a coach certification, all of which is valid for 3 years. Unified partners, we actually haven't had anybody doing unified track and field at our community summer games. It's a big thing for the interscholastic program. Hopefully we'll have some folks consider doing some unified relays this year. But all unified partners and any other volunteer must have that volunteer screening and the protective behavior both. These other volunteers do not need to have the concussion training. Can't hurt to do it, but it's not required. Concussion certification, again, you'll get these slides. This walks you through the link. If you use the CDC, which is what we recommend, takes about 30 minutes to do it. There is also, each of your areas was given one or more compact discs or CDs that has the video on it, that you can do this live or in person and do it as a group. We've done that a couple different times. And just to clarify, there is no paper and pencil written version where somebody can just read something for this concussion certification. It does not exist. It needs to be either the online or the CD-ROM version, which are identical that they can go through. We're limited by Special Olympics International as to which courses we can offer, and we can only offer the CDC one, and the National Federation of High School has a similar one. It's a little bit longer, it's a little more cumbersome. That's why we recommend the CDC. For protective behaviors, this is a pretty quick thing. It takes 10 minutes at most to do it. It's good for 3 years, and again, we ask folks just to send their completion to Rachel Maddock, so we have it on hand. Again, you'll get this slide, and it'll be all in there. We'll send some reminders to folks as well. And just as a reminder, to qualify for the state tournament, you need to meet all the deadlines. Coaches have to have their certifications done. Need to have, as Ron said, a minimum of 2 sanctioned qualifiers. There are, in very rare situations, exceptions granted to those above requirements, not to any of the medicals or paperwork forms, but to the minimum qualifiers or such. That is only granted very rarely by request of your area director, and just because the area director requests this does not mean that it will be granted. But if there's some unique situation, talk to us. We'll see what we can do. And then questions and such. I will point out, following that, the reference slides, these are copies of the new medical form. This is all in the slide deck that you'll get, and so on. So that said, we do have about 4 minutes or so for any additional questions. A question came in from a coach. Does every coach have to have sport-specific certification, or just head coaches? The answer to that is all coaches should have that. I can't sit here and tell you how rigorously we're going to be enforcing that, but that is the standard now, is that all coaches have that. I'm just going to be candid with you. We're 2 folks down at the moment and such. So if they're not coaches, they can certainly be volunteers for your program as well. If you have any other questions, Monica is asking us to repeat the info on limiting the number of softball entries. Monica, that's in the slides. I believe it was either, Ron, do you recall, is it 20 or 25%?
My memory says 20%. I can, let me see if I can find that slide pretty quickly. I think it was 20.
20%. I found it on my other computer. So it is 20%. Again, if you have unique situations, such as you have a whole bunch of young athletes that just came in, I'll use an example, not to put Washington County on the spot. They had a unique situation a couple years ago where they had a nice influx of new athletes who were of lower ability, and we were fine making that adjustment. The big thing here is making sure that folks are pushing their athletes to do the official events, and only those athletes who really can't do those official events do the softball throw or tennis ball throw, the standing long jump, or the 50-meter dash or shorter. I'm sorry, Ron, I sort of jumped in and took over here. I apologize.
Well, no, that's fine. I apologize for my technical glitches at the start of this, and
I have to answer to Anna if we're late. She has the next one. But we do have more if anybody has any questions. Either if you want to ask the question live, just raise your hand using the raise hand function, or you can type it in to the question panel.
Or send me an email and I'll respond first thing in the morning or this evening.
Don't see any other questions. So that said, I guess a big thank you to everybody. Looking forward to seeing everybody throughout the season. Oh, one other thing, and we'll coordinate this through your area director. As I think many people know, and there's actually touches on here, if you're hosting a local competition, there's a sanction form to fill out and submit, and that gives us the information so we can share it with folks. That also provides the opportunity, if you want to borrow some of our equipment. I can't promise you that we can always offer that. The further in advance you make the request, the more likely it is that we can make the loan. But whether it's mini jabs or the starter blocks or batons or stopwatches, anything along those lines, we can loan them out as long as we get them back in. So just be sure to include, there's a space on that form that you can include that. We can accommodate. We certainly will we'll try to help you. Ron, any last thoughts?
No. Again, looking forward to a great season. Anyone has a question, certainly feel free to reach out this evening, tomorrow, or at any time. Be glad to talk track.
Great. Thank you much, everybody.
Thank you.